You are listening to the Hiking Radio Network, where we talk the walk with shows by hikers, about hikers, for everybody.
This is the Hammock Hangers Podcast, where we hang out and talk about everything from hammocks and hammock camping to the group hangs from around the country. All right, what is up, everyone? Welcome back to the Hammock Hangers Podcast. I am your host, Paul Collins, or also known as Skunkape. And of course, AJ Glenn, or Pheonix, is here with me as well.
Hello, everyone.
All right, so this week we have a very special guest on. Some of you may already know him and listen to his podcast. Even if you don't, you should recognize his voice because you hear him during the intro of this podcast each week. I'm referring to none other than Steve Adams, or as myself and everyone else calls him, Mighty Blue.
I got to say, hang on, before you go on. I was looking over my shoulder. You got someone special on the show. I was wondering who it might be.
Oh, that's funny. Mighty Blue not only has his own podcast called Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, but he is also the creator of the Hiking Radio Network, which is the network that this podcast is a part of. I wanted to have Mighty Blue on the show today because for about the past 3 years, I have been talking to him about hammocks and trying to convert him to get him off the ground. He joined us at HangCon back in 2021, but didn't have much desire to even try out a hammock back then, despite all the grunting and groaning I was hearing as he crawled in and out of his tent.
Didn't judge.
But last October, when Mighty Blue, Jester, Pony, and myself hosted the Woods Hole Weekend in Virginia, I got him to lay in one and try it out. And it was at that point I saw some real interest and knew it wouldn't be long before he was a tree dweller too. Fast forward to just a couple of months ago, I received a call from Mighty Blue telling me that he was going to be heading up to trail days, then going on a little hiking trip afterwards. And he was wondering if I had a hammock he could borrow and try out on his hike. So of course I put together a complete setup for him. And now that he is back from that trip, I wanted him on here so that he could talk a little bit about his experience with the hammock. So let's welcome Mighty Blue to the show. Welcome,
Thanks,
Mighty
man.
Blue.
Nice to meet you. And I was absolutely resistant to doing this. Not the interview, but I was resistant to the idea of a hammock because, the real reason when I went to HangCon I was resistant was because it looked so darn complicated to put up, all those struts and whatever it was, all those ropes but the one you actually let me use, which I'm now buying off you, which is great. One you actually let me use was so simple that just swung it for me. I mean, I may not even been able to do it had I not attended that. When I came to pick the hammock up and you showed me how to do it, it was so darn simple that even I was able to put it up quickly. So that gives you a rough idea.
Well, I was going to ask you, why you were so hesitant, on even trying a hammock. Because I know, I had talked to you several times about it. And I remember back then I had told you that one of these days I'm going to get you into a hammock. And you would just, you always chuckled at me and everything.
Well, I was hesitant because, intuitively, I could not see how I could get comfortable and actually sleep the night in a hammock. I could see how comfortable it could be for 5 minutes. But the idea of spending a whole night in a hammock was almost anathema to me. I just didn't think it would work. And as you know, I was kind of shocked how much it did work. And we're probably going to talk about that in a minute. But I was mainly resistant because I just didn't think I could get comfortable. You made it at HangCon. You made it more confusing to me because of putting the darn thing up. I thought, well, that's never going to work for me. I'll never remember how to do that. And then it just kind of all fell into place, and I absolutely loved it.
So what is just so we have a kind of a baseline, what is kind of your go-to camping shelter setup before you tried out the
I'm a floor dweller, and I had I still have obviously a Z-Packs tent. I think one of the things about being in a tent, I'm an older guy, so frankly, anything new is difficult for me to take on anyway, And also, are you really going to buy new equipment when you're in your 70s. I'm not sure many people are going to buy new stuff when they're in their 70s. So I had a tent. I had obviously my sleeping bag and so on. I was quite comfortable in them. I never had a spectacularly good night's sleep, really ever, in my tent. And I just thought that was part of camping, was not sleeping that well. And yet Paul would always say to me, "Oh, I sleep great." In fact, sometimes when I'm at home, I sleep in my hammock at home as well, which is kind of weird, by the way. Let me tell you. And,
usually I have one strung up behind me here. You can actually see the straps kind of right there hanging. I don't have one hanging up right now.
It was. I just didn't see how it could be comfortable. I didn't see how I could lie down and move around in the night and stay comfortable.
So when was the actual turning point that made you want to actually give hammocks a try? Was it last October when we was at Woods Hole weekend and you actually laid in the hammock for that first time?
I could see the comfort. It wasn't until I actually slept the night when I did my hike a couple of weeks ago on the AT, 5 nights. And my girlfriend actually said to me, "Take your tent just in case you can't get comfortable in the hammock." So I'd be carrying a tent and a hammock. And that didn't appear to me to make a lot of sense. And also, I'm a great one for taking an out when it's presented. So I didn't want the opportunity then to just switch from a hammock into a tent. So I thought, it's 5 days. What's the worst that can happen? I don't sleep for 5 days. I'll live. I ain't going to die. So I knew I'd be able to do it. Or I'd sleep in a shelter. So I didn't want to be able to get away. I wanted to give it a proper try. So the real changing point was waking up the next morning. And I'd been asleep all night, and I just couldn't believe it.
Well, I know you had like a crash course in learning to set it up, because you met me down. We were at Starkey, and AJ was there, and I mean, you only spent maybe an hour down there.
Yeah.
And we gave you like a crash course, and I know a couple of times you had when you were on your hike, you had sent me a couple of messages with some pictures and stuff just to make sure everything was.
I did a Facebook Live video of getting in and out of the hammock. That was the dumbest thing I've ever done. I thought, well, if I suddenly sit on this and it bloody falls down, it'd be a nightmare. I get so much abuse, but I sat there and it worked. I thought it was great.
Yeah. So how was the first time setting it up on your own when you were out there?
Well, the only thing I actually had to remember was the straps, the blue straps. I don't know why I'm demonstrating because it's not on video, is it? But the only thing I had to remember were those straps, and that once you go put one strap through the loop and you pull it tightish, and then you have to go under the metal bar and then pull it out the other side. That's the only thing I had to remember. And of course, as soon as I did that, and it didn't break or didn't fall out, I thought, well, that works. That makes a lot of sense. And then I learned quickly by day 2, I was setting it up perfectly well. Day 1, perhaps not quite so well. And you can adjust it incredibly quickly. I could take it down pretty quickly. I thought, this doesn't suck. The best thing about a hammock, though, for me, was the fly. The tarp thing over the top.
The tarp.
Yeah. And that was great because I held it up with the poles. Mine wasn't quite as big as the tarp you had when I saw you that weekend, Paul.
Oh, the monstrosity.
The size of a small town. Yeah.
The behemoth.
and I thought to myself, I so wish I'd brought my chair with me. I've got one of these little 1 pound chairs, and I'd love to sit there with rain going on outside and nice and covered up. And there's something about being in the woods. I think you have to establish what your home is and where you are and know what's around you and know where the privy is and stuff. But get your home in good shape, and then you can relax and enjoy your home. That's effectively what I felt like straight away. I felt comfortable in that hammock, in that whole setup straight away, which was remarkable for me.
So did it rain on you?
It did. And you know what? And I know I haven't tested it in the rain, but I'm sure if I start getting wet underneath it, I have to move the top. So I presume it's not rocket science. It doesn't feel like it is. I think it's something I can resolve. I felt very comfortable out there, surprisingly.
Yeah, I would say the time that I've spent in a tent versus the time that I've spent in a hammock, I've actually stayed drier in a hammock much more than I ever did in a tent, just because, you're not on the ground. So even if you do spring a leak somewhere, you're not laying in it. And I actually, when I go out, I look forward to getting caught in the rain because, like you said, being under that tarp and being out and establishing your home base and just being able to not only see everything around you, but hear it, and you can experience that particular slice of nature so much more purely.
Yeah. I think not being on and I hadn't even thought about this until you just mentioned that, not being on an air pad makes a difference as well. It felt a much more natural environment to be sleeping in. Once I'd learned how to get comfortable and relatively straight. I did make a complete cock up of one thing, which I will tell you about in a minute if you want. Because I'll tell you about now. I set it up totally wrong because the quilt I've told you this? I'm not sure I have. The quilt that's underneath, okay? I remember when I set the hammock up first, there were these little clips at the side. I thought, well, that must be sort of something else. I didn't know what that was for. So anyway, I set my underquilt up at either end and it fitted fine and it was all good. But when I was lying in it, I would shift one way and the underquilt would slide a bit and I had to put my arm out the hammock to bring it back up again because I hadn't used those little clips to attach the underquilt.
Yeah, the quilt clips.
Which,
yep,
I mean,
on the side.
It should have been the most obvious thing in the world. And to be fair, you actually mentioned them to me as well. So in my very few instructions, I totally ignored one of them. But, that gives you an indication of how comfortable I was. Once I sleep, man, I'm dead to the world. I went out for the first night. I think I was 8 hours asleep. I don't get it.
How many hours did you normally get in tent?
3 tops, possibly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So did you notice in the hammock when you were laying there that you didn't have those pressure points that you normally do on an air pad or something?
Well, as I say, I think I sort of answered the question in a slightly different way. That the air pad, I'm very aware of the air pad when I'm in a tent, So I wasn't aware of an air pad. In fact, I was aware of not having an air pad, and that was particularly comforting. And I was incredibly warm. It got down to the late 30s at night. It was fine. Yeah, absolutely. I only had a 30-degree quilt on me. I was warm as toast. That was really, really good shape.
Oh, is that what your
top quilt is? This Catabatic Gear quilt, which I had in my 2014 hike. It's lost a bit of loft, but it was still fine. And I've got.
And it's a 30-degree.
30-degree, yeah. And I was very comfortable.
So you had a 30-degree top, and then that under quilt is a 20 degree.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah, that's a 20-degree.
Yeah,
gear
and I was thinking about the rain. I wasn't hoping it was going to rain, by the way, AJ. But if it had, one thing you learn when you're hiking, you learn to cope with what's there, don't you? It is. Something's happening outside, you cope with that. Something's happening there, you fall over, you get up, you keep going, you cope with things. And so if it had rained, I would have coped with it. I would have been okay. I wouldn't have cried about it. I would just got on with it,
Well, the neat thing about a hammock, also having a hammock set up, if it does, if you're out there and you're hiking and you are in the rain, you can set up the tarp first and get it pitched out and everything. And then you have a dry place to go and you can sit there, you can cook and all that. And then you can set up your hammock and you don't have to worry about your hammock.
Well, I was thinking about that. I didn't set it up that way because it is easier to do it without the tarp over your head, isn't it? I presume.
It depends.
Well, your experience. So I'm sure if I've got experience.
Right. Once you get used to it, you'll learn how high to set the tarp up. And I mean, you set your tarp up depending on your weather anyhow. If you know it's going to be clear, you may want to set it up a little bit higher just so that you can walk up under and all that, pitch the sides high and all that. But if you know it's going to, you're going to have some bad weather where you might have, harder rain and maybe some wind, you'll want to pitch it lower. So that way even with the wind, it don't blow it up under and get you wet or anything.
Or at least if you hope there is no rain, but then somebody has to say something. We should probably put our tarps up because it might rain, and then you just know it's going to rain.
Well, but you see, I thought it was particularly nice though to have, as I said to you about setting your home up, it felt part of the home. I think I would always have to have that tub over there. I'm that type of person. I want to get comfortable in my environment. I know what my space is, and that would have been my space underneath that top, and I would have had my chair going forward. I mean, I tell you, next year, if I'm going to the UK and I'm going sometime late March, I'm going to get crappy weather there at some stage. So, it's a given. I'll get rain, I'll get wind, I'll get everything. So, no, it'll be fine.
And I mean, I'm sure, you might have a day that turns into a learning experience.
Great expression.
And I mean, we still, even with as much, as, experiences AJ and I both have, with hammocks and everything, there's still times that,
we get learning experience.
Exactly.
You get nightmare experiences, I think. I say, underneath that top you had the other day, there's no way rain's getting on you from that.
Oh no, you'd have to have a huge, like, I'd have to be out in a hurricane.
How much did that weigh?
Before.
How much that weigh?
It really isn't that much. That one there, maybe a couple pounds.
It was huge.
I mean, it's huge and covers. I mean,
the whole
yes, exactly. Yeah.
Jay, what does Jason call that one? That's his
fly?
The what?
Monster fly? Or
no, I call it the behemoth. He calls it the what does he call it?
I think it's the dining fly.
The dining fly. That's it. Because that's what he uses it for. He has, he made himself one, of course, and he uses it to put, whenever he goes to like some of the hangs and all that, he'll have all of his like stoves and chairs and all that. He don't put his tarp up under that one. I just wanted something that I could, put over me and not have to worry. I could put chairs and everything else.
You could have had an entire dining table. You're right, underneath it. You're right.
Yeah.
I'm interested actually. Yep. How did you choose what you chose? And I can't even remember what you gave me the quilt, you gave me the hammock, and you gave me the what's it?
Well, remember I gave you. I mean, I knew that you wouldn't. Just getting into it, you'd want more of like an entry level, type that wasn't going to cost you an arm and a leg.
I think we talked about like simplicity.
Right. I wanted something that was going to be simple for you to set up and everything. And so, and if you remember, I brought two different hammocks. I brought the one that was zippered.
You did.
And then I brought the one that had the bottom entry net, because I wasn't sure which one you would prefer. Me, I think most of the time I prefer the zippered, myself.
Why would you not have zippered? What's the reason?
Okay, I can speak to that because I actually, in a way, prefer a Frankie.
What's it called?
It's called a Frankie bug net because the guy that designed it, his trail name was Frankie.
But they also call it a bottom entry.
Bottom entry. One of the things that I like about a bottom entry bug net is you get a lot more of the freedom of movement with the actual hammock. When you have a zippered, it's kind of the structure of the hammock is a little bit more rigid, and when you're but both of us are kind of taller, so when you put your feet up against the side, it just naturally kind of curves in. But if you have a Frankie, you don't have that rigidity, and so you can lounge out a little bit more, and it's not as cramped of a feeling.
I never felt cramped in there at all. Funny enough.
See, I don't. Not at all. I don't feel cramped in a zipper.
Yeah, I mean, maybe like cramped is not exactly. It's just like I don't necessarily like the pushing of the fabric up against my ankle. It felt like my ankle had to be at a certain. It would not. Really? I don't know. Flop over. But yeah. Because one of the gathered ends that I built for myself that I used for years, I specifically used a bottom entry for two reasons. One, that's what I could find, and that's what I've really liked compared to some of the other zippered bug net. Two, I made one hammock with an attached bug net or zippered bug net, and I will still only make one because
Well, see, I like the zippered better because when I use a bottom entry, just a netless hammock with the bottom entry, net hanging over it, my pillow, if I have one, or my quilt or whatever, anytime I usually get in my hammock, it usually falls out.
Yeah.
And a zippered, it don't.
I definitely noticed that. My pillow, when I'm obviously on an airbed, it moves around all the time, and my head's often hanging over the side of the airbed. It's shambles. This one didn't. Once I was there. I wasn't going anywhere. I'm one of these lucky people who's got to the age I am without having to get up 3 or 4 times a night. I didn't have to get up for a pee at all. None of those nights I got up for a pee.
Well, I've noticed whenever I sleep in my bed, I get up 2 or 3 times at least during the night. Usually whenever I sleep in a hammock, I don't. I'll sleep all night.
That's something very different, a very different experience. So I've noticed when I sleep in my bridge hammock, I don't have to get up. However, when I was in a gathered end, I would always have to get up at least once in the middle of the night, which is something that I never did.
Yeah, I think it's one of the great skills in life, not having to pee in the middle of the night. And I acquired it. Must have a healthy prostate somewhere down the line.
So, from the first night of your hiking trip to your last night, did you feel that setting up the hammock and taking it down got quicker?
Definitely. Yeah, no question about it. Yeah.
Okay.
And I, like you do when you're setting up a tent, like you do when you're doing anything with hiking, you learn how to do it the best way. You get the optimal way to do something.
Right.
By the end of it, I was happy. I could set it up and take it down. Not quite as fast as I could do my tent. My tent is very easy to take down and set up.
Right.
But I'm sure if I can take this next year, which I want to, it's a 650-mile hike, so it's plenty of time to get used to using it and so on.
Right.
I'll be just as fast taking this down as I do taking the tent down.
Yeah. I mean, shoot, I know when I done, my hike of the AT, I used a hammock the whole way, and I would usually have mine set up before, the ones in the tents would have theirs set up. And, I'd be set up and already cooking my food and eating before they even found a flat spot on the ground to even begin.
The lack of a flat spot is something, by the way, having hiked about 5,000 miles on the Appalachian Trail, I've never set my tent up on a flat spot. It's never been right. It's a bit here or a bit there. With a hammock, the wonderful feeling of not having to worry about it was great.
You could have a incline of like 45 degrees as long as you got 2 trees. You can still get that hammock level.
And first night, funny enough, was quite an incline, and it didn't worry me at all. No, second night, actually, it didn't worry me at all. I just worked out what I needed to do and just went ahead and did it. And it was it was a revelation to me, Paul. I promise you, it was a revelation, and I just had no idea I could be so comfortable in a night sleeping in the woods.
So, I mean, with all that being said, I mean, obviously, it sounds like you get a lot better sleep in a hammock than you ever have in a tent. So, do you see yourself ever going back to a tent?
Yeah, I think so. I'm sure it must depend upon where you are. I would think there's certain places in. If I ever went out west again, there might be more difficult to find places to hang a tent, especially hang a hammock, especially when you go above tree line, for example.
Well, I mean, I know, if there's no trees, or I know there's certain places where they don't allow hammocks.
Yeah.
I know that you would have to use a tent, but if you say you're somewhere and you have the option to be able to use a hammock, would you even consider using a tent at that point? Or would
I think now, knowing I mean, frankly, I've slept in it 5 nights, so I want to set some expectation here. I mean, I may eventually not like it. If I tell you, I know it's going to improve once I've got the clips sorted out as well.
Right.
And once I've got that, I suspect it'll be even more comfortable. So I'm just going to work on it next time. I don't know whether you're hiking after the Woods Hole weekend. We were going to talk about hiking down to the older gathering in Abingdon or near Abingdon. We were going to hike into Damascus. I'm going to test it then, about 4 or 5 nights in the woods again, and see how that goes. Yeah, I'm excited about the prospect of using it again, definitely. And also, I did like the idea. When I got to camp, actually, I didn't set it up fully. I just, because it wasn't raining, it was lovely weather anyway.
Right.
I just set up the hammock itself without anything else, just to sit in it. Just to chill out at the end of a long day. And I lay down and actually dropped off once or twice. We got to camp early. I set my hammock up with nothing else, no quilt underneath, no tarp on, and I'd gone. I was snoring within seconds.
I've done that in the backyard a couple of times. Have a hammock set up back there and doze off, and my wife, she just leaves me out there. She knows that I'll wake up at some point and come on inside. And
would it work, by the way, Paul? You say in the backyard. In my backyard, I've got one tree that would allow it to go around. The other, I've got fence posts. Other than that, would it hold up the fence post? And bear in mind, I'm 250 pounds and a bit more.
Maybe. I would try it myself.
I don't have to put. It's absolutely the wrong answer.
I mean, I'm kind of that person anyhow. Somebody throws something and says, "Here, try this." I'm gonna try it. But
all right, yeah.
I mean, I don't see why it wouldn't.
Nor do I, but I haven't tried it yet. I am thinking about doing it. I thought of actually doing it this morning before I came on here, but I didn't.
I mean, AJ and I both have like stands that we can use, where we got one end of the hammock hooked to a tree and then the other end hooked to.
Oh, right. So what is the
stand?
What's the stand then? What size? What's that then?
I mean, the one that I'm talking about there would be, you got the Yobo Freedom stand, which is
Tensa Solo stand.
You got the Tensa Solos, which the Tensa Solo is just one pole with 2 lines going down to anchor.
Right.
And the Yobo Freedom is 2 legs with lines going down.
That does not sound safe to me at all. So, not at all.
I have to. They look, when you look at them, it's like there ain't no way those will hold, but they obviously do.
They obviously do because they sell.
As long as you set them up right.
Trip report after my trip out west, because now I have used the Yobo cricket stand and the Tensa 4 hammock stand, which are a little bit more bulky. I don't know if I camp or hike.
They're full stands though.
Yeah, they're full
where you
stands.
don't need any trees at all.
Right. Wow.
But the thing about, yes, the Solo and the Freedom, they do have 2 lines coming out. You could add more lines.
Yeah.
To support a bigger person.
But just looking at them, you wouldn't think that they would support because they're just aluminum poles. But
yeah, I'm staying with trees. For now, I think I'm staying with trees. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it's they're totally safe though. We'll have to one day when we're back down at Starkey camping again. How far was Starkey away from you?
It was about 50 or 60 miles. So it was a ways, but just a drive. The thing is with America, Florida, well, America generally, Americans don't mind driving 60 or 70 or 100 miles, do they? It's no distance at all. In England, that's an expedition. So.
Oh, yeah. So whenever next time AJ and I, are down that way at Starkey or whatever, I'll let you know if you want to, come out and join us for the weekend. You can come out and join us, and we'll show you some more.
Stands are a whole nother game.
We'll take you down the rabbit holes.
I'd love to see them. I must say.
So, now I know, whenever I was doing the intro and all that, joking around, I was saying that about the grunts and the groans of crawling into a tent and everything, because I know if I crawl into a tent, there's going to be a lot of grunting and a lot of groaning going on, especially whenever I try and crawl out and then stand back up. Did you have as many of those grunts and groan moments in the hammock?
Something you need to learn, Paul, is that these are called old man noises, and I have them in excess. And so getting into a tent for me, yes, I grunt and groan get into a tent. Although frankly, once I'm in there and I zip, it's that whole, I think it's the practice of zipping up, zipping yourself in. You feel comfortable, you feel cozy. Having that thing above my head in the hammock with all my stuff around me was great. But normally if I'm in a tent, I've got my stuff in exactly the same place every night in my tent.
Right.
So I know where things are in my tent. And that's one bit that's slightly better, I think, about a tent. There is more space to do stuff and put stuff. But frankly, if you're hiking all day, basically the evening or the night is about going to sleep anyway, isn't it? So really, if it's about sleep, I think the hammock wins that one. But if you need to wake up in the middle of the night, or you do wake up in the middle of the night, I want to find my Kindle or my phone or something. I could put those in the thing that hang up over my head. What's it called?
Yeah, on the ridgeline. It's a ridgeline organizer.
Yeah, the ridgeline organizer. That worked really well. I had quite a bit of stuff in there as well. So I was quite pleased about that.
There's a couple of other things that we can set you up with for organizing also.
Oh,
they have like peak shelves and stuff like that. So like up behind your head where the
we can help
together.
out your hammock.
Oh yeah.
We can add storage options.
Can I have lights on it as well?
Actually, yes, they do have hammock lights that you can put on your ridgeline.
I have no doubt.
Yeah, there's a lot of little things that you can get if you wanted. You have gear storage, gear hammocks that you can actually hang under your hammock to put like your pack and certain stuff in and all that stuff.
Yeah, I think return to what you said. I think that I make noises when I'm getting to my tent. I think sometimes us old guys make those noises almost for effect. So we're moving slowly just for effect, but actually, no, not really. But getting into the hammock was remarkably easy. Of course it was. Once I realised about what I'm meant to do with holding on to having the hammock going over the quilt bit and not ending up underneath the hammock and in the quilt, might have been a bit awkward. But it was much easier to get in and then just swing round. And of course, I learned that pretty quickly. It's not rocket science, is it? After all,
right? Nope.
You get in a position that's comfortable, and I got in a position that's comfortable, and I can move around in the night as well, which is quite nice.
And then what about getting out of the hammock? Did it seem pretty easy for you?
I'm just trying to think back to it. Yes, because that thing about I tried to set it at a level where when I'm sitting there, it's not cutting off the circulation of my legs underneath me, so it has to be low enough so I can sit and still ease myself out. And of course, then I put my feet on the ground and then just walk back and just step straight out of it. I absolutely mastered that without any problem at all.
Okay.
Now, the one good thing that I think you mentioned of thinking about bringing a chair or whatever, I think it's really cool that if the piece of gear that you have, like a hammock, could act as a chair. If you just wanted to set it up and just have a place to just kind of sit and chill out and still be with everybody that you're camping with.
Well, AJ, there is a difference. I think the difference for me is that if I got into my hammock and just laid back, I'd fall asleep. If I get in my chair, I have to stay awake because I feel it's going to tip over at any moment. So there's a difference. So I still like the idea of the chair. I could then sit there and make me coffee right next to me, have my book, and I think I'm going back to what I said earlier on. You're in your home. It's not the home you live in all the time. But it's a home from home. You need it to be as comfortable, and you need to be as comfortable in it as possible. And that's what I did with my tent, and that's what I've done with my hammock so far. I've had a couple of tents before, both of which felt like really my home. And I didn't think I'd find anything I'd like as much, but I do like this. I like it a lot.
We'll have to, next time we see you, we'll have to show you a little trick that if you're wanting to use your hammock as just a chair and not actually lounge out in it, you can take and kind of fold it in half.
All right.
Widthwise.
Yes. Yep. So you take the two sides and you fold it in half.
Right.
Then you sit on that, and it makes it where it don't cut that circulation.
Right. Interesting. Okay. Yeah.
Makes it more like a chair.
I'd like to test that one out. Yeah, definitely. Because funny enough, I went to the AT kickoff this year, and I gave a speech at the AT kickoff, and there was a couple of different companies there selling their gear and so on. And this one guy had a chair hammock. It's like a short hammock.
Yeah, I've got one.
Oh, have you?
Yeah.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
So, and I thought, what a great idea. And you can't lie back in it asleep. You can sort of a bit, but it's my size, my height is probably not practical. But it was really kind of a nice thing.
Yeah, it's just a small hammock. You can use it as a gear hammock as well up under, for the most part.
Oh, so people do that as well, do they?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Okay.
So I know, I've made one that I gave to my father-in-law that, depending on the fabric that you use to make them, you can either use it as a chair, a gear hammock, or as a pack cover.
Oh, right. Oh, God.
Yep.
Never
so
think
about
that at all. But my pack doesn't need a cover. I just put everything inside in a one of those compactor bags and squeeze it all up. And if it gets wet, the rest of the stuff gets wet. I don't care. I'm kind of relaxed about stuff.
I actually brought last year for the Woods Hole weekend. I actually had one of the gear slings with me, and I set it up as a chair when we went down to Dismal Falls.
Oh, I didn't remember that. Oh.
Well, speaking of a Woods Hole weekend, do you want to talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, it's kind of had a bit of a life of its own over the years. And the basic idea is that people who want to learn what it's like to be hiking and hike in the AT or do a section hike of the AT, there's certain things that only people who've done it can actually tell them. You can read all you like. You can go down the YouTube rabbit hole, and haven't we all at some stage in our lives? And that's great. That's great. But there's nothing like in person where you speak with somebody and you demonstrate to somebody what needs to be done. And the way in which we put this together, we meet at this the hostel Weary Feet, which is a couple of miles. Actually, it turned out to be more than a couple of miles, about 3 miles, just over 3 miles south of Dismal Falls. And we'd hiked. We had lunch at Weary Feet, hiked into Dismal Falls. You were there, Paul, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
Jester was there, and Clay, Bodyman Evans was there. We've all through hiked the trail, so we've all got miles and miles under our feet, and we've done this before. We go into Dismal Falls. We set up camp. Our guests, who, if they want to do that hike, they don't have to, but if they want to do that hike, that's what they do. They come with us. You did a great fire starting thing, and amazingly, you had a fire. I've never been able to light one in my life ever. So shows what I know. Again, we had somebody from Appalachian Trail Conservancy do a Leave No Trace demonstration, which was excellent. We did that down by the water as well. We just basically hung out and talked about various things you need to do. The next morning, we hiked back to Weary Feet, and we drive to Woods Hole, which is awesome. Neville gets us some lovely food. This is Friday afternoon by now, and I think we have a little class or two in the afternoon and early evening. Have a great dinner at Neville's. Then we're going to do something slightly different this year. We're going to, on the Saturday morning, we're going to have a brunch, and then we're going to head back to the Appalachian Trail. Just up from Neville's, we can hike 2 miles into a shelter, show people what it's like at a shelter if they haven't never been there. We'll have 1 or 2 of our classes out of the shelter before we hike back to Neville's and get some more food. And it's going to be great. And then we'll stay the night Saturday night, and then we'll wake up on Sunday morning. I think we do more of a summing up on the Sunday morning, and then we head home lunchtime. But we're going to go hiking, aren't we?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. I think people are going to enjoy it. It's going to be one of those things that I know that everybody who's been before has got a great deal from it. So hopefully others will experience the life of being at Woods Hole, which is a great hostel anyway, and they'll be able to pick the brains of people who've actually done this hike. I've got a class of the Mighty Blue class of 2023. I've been following 16 people on the AT, many of whom seemed at one time or other like they were going to get to the end, but people drop out of this trip.
Right. And
they drop out of it for all sorts of reasons. We all know how lucky we are to have completed this trip, because luck plays a big part in how we're successful on these hikes.
Yep.
And listening to some of these people, for all sorts of reasons, they've dropped out, and we're trying to give people the tools to cope with the things they may face when they're on the trail. And I know that the people who we spoke with last year, our guests last year, got a lot from it, because I can tell from the emails they sent me. They just loved it.
Yeah. I see messages from them, a lot on Facebook and all that
Yeah.
stuff, and
Yeah.
I know they really enjoyed it. It's
Well, on the terms of like a hammock, with the Woods Hole weekend, you talk about like that a lot of people drop out for various reasons. And going back to a comment that you made earlier in the episode where you would say in a tent you would only sleep maybe 3-4 hours a night. Do you
Sure.
think using a hammock where you're able to get a consistent 6 to 8 hours of comfortable sleep would be maybe one of the solutions for some of the reasons why people would drop out of an AT hike? I just imagine, for 2-3 months of the year only getting 3-4 hours of sleep a night would not make me a pleasant person.
Yeah. You know what? I may have been exaggerating. It was as low as that because some nights I did get sort of a good night's sleep in the tent as well. But certainly, when you're living a life that is very unlike our regular lives, generally unlike our regular lives, anything could knock you off the trail. One false step, but certainly not being able to sleep is definitely a factor. One of our class of 23 members who actually came to Woods Hole last year, she really had a problem sleeping because she'd go to bed at hike at midnight, 8 o'clock in the evening, and then she's awake by 2 o'clock in the morning. And that's tough. So, and managing your sleep, managing everything to do with your hike is what gives you the chance of being successful. And we're trying to, in this weekend, give everybody the tools they probably need when they come across problems, because hiking definitely makes you a problem solver. Something I don't think I ever really was, frankly, in the past. But being on a trail, there are so few options to do things. You either do this or you do that. You do this or you do that. I love that being on trail. At home, there's lots of different complications of options you can do. Having fewer options on the trail is much simpler, but managing those options and learning how to cope with those options is an important part of it as well.
Yeah, that's something that I would always annoy me with, like when my son was in Cub Scouts. Really, if they were planning a camping trip and if the weather wasn't, above 50 degrees, if it was a small chance of rain, that they would cancel a camping trip. It's like, no, like that, like if you might have a rough night one night, but you're not going to die. But if you have those,
you're going to learn from it.
Yeah, you're going to learn from it. And so the next time that you go out, you won't make those same mistakes and you can be just better prepared overall. And I would say the same thing you could say on trail.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. And in fact, funnily enough, what you just said, that strikes a chord with me. We protect kids. I know we should protect kids, but we shouldn't wrap them up in cotton wool. If it's going to be raining, let them face a night of rain. It's because it'll be a story they'll want to talk about for the rest of their lives. Remember that thunderstorm we're in? It was great. As opposed to that nice sunny 50-degree night. Who cares?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And what you were saying a minute ago, as far as like the Woods Hole weekend, and sure, people can go on and watch YouTube videos and all that stuff. But I think what makes the Woods Hole weekend, one of the things that makes it so neat is since we're there, presenting for these people, they can actually ask questions and get them answered.
Yeah.
Whereas, you can sit there and watch a YouTube video all day and talk to the screen, but
sure.
it ain't
I do that a lot. Actually, talk with the screen. Yeah. Never asked me back. But yeah, you're right. Those face-to-face interactions with people, it often feels like being in a shelter. Where you're talking to people, you're all preparing your food together. You just sit with someone one day, you sit with somebody else the next day. It's just kind of part of being that whole thing of that camaraderie, where people don't stare into the phones the whole time. And having a question you want to ask somebody who's actually done it, they might ask us questions we can't answer, because all I can tell you is I know how I got to the end of that trail.
Right.
You know how you got to the end of that trail, and Jester knows how she does, and Clay knows how he does. And, it's not the same for everybody, but you can give them
Right.
some coping mechanisms, which I think are important when things go wrong. And I think we certainly transmitted some of those last year. As I say, I look at all of the interviews after the Woods Hole weekend from our guests. They were all positive. There wasn't one negative one amongst them. They really enjoyed it. They had what I think is great value of staying at Woods Hole itself. That's worth the cost of admission virtually itself. But, that to have us talking to them about hiking, going on the trail 2 separate times, not for long hikes, but just to be on the trail.
Right.
There's something magical about being on the Appalachian Trail. It will never leave me. The moment I step on it, it's almost like I feel like I'm on I can feel Georgia behind me,
Mm-hmm.
and I can feel Maine ahead of me. I know that's they're connected states, and I know that whichever way I go, I'll reach one of them.
Right.
So that's a great feeling to have, and it's never left me from the day I first stepped on it 9 years ago.
Well, that's what I tell people. I tell them, that I might have finished the Appalachian Trail, but the Appalachian Trail has not finished with me, and I don't know that it ever will.
Do you think you'll go again?
Oh, yeah.
Who'd be fool enough to go a second time? Apart from me.
I definitely will do it again.
Would you do the whole thing?
Oh yeah. I'll do it the whole thing again. I mean, it's changed. It's changed in 10 years.
I'm sure. But I say to people, I'm not sure I particularly like hiking that much, but I love, or backpacking that much. I love through hiking. That whole thing of starting somewhere and then finishing however many months later, in my case, it was 6 months later, at my destination. And all that stuff in between is what has made up that journey. And I love that part of it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a big fan of going out for a long weekend and just doing a couple of day hikes somewhere. It doesn't do it for me at all. But this 5-day thing, one of the reasons I wanted to do it was to try out the hammock. So, that worked out.
Well, I mean, I just got back, about a month ago, maybe, from up there in Virginia. I went up to, McAfee Knob area and, hiked around there for a while, because whenever I done it in 2012, that whole area, I didn't have any views or anything because the weather was bad. So I wanted to go back up there, and I actually got pictures. I got to see what it actually looked like at McAfee Knob.
Did you hang your feet over the end?
And no, I couldn't do that.
You're a wuss.
I probably would have ended up falling. The older I get, the
lower the ground gets,
more my equilibrium gets off. But no, I sat up there for a while though, and I loved it. And I'll tell you, it humbled me going back. Because I was like, whenever I was heading up there, I was thinking to myself, it's only 4 miles. I can do that, and I got a 3 mile an hour pace. It'll take me just over an hour.
Yeah, good luck with that.
Yeah, no, it's not the same coming straight from Florida.
No,
to the parking lot of McAfee and hiking up the 4 miles.
Oh yeah.
I didn't take into consideration that I'd already, in 2012, I'd already hiked, 712 ish miles.
And you were 11 years younger.
Exactly. And about 50 pounds lighter.
I resemble that remark.
A lot of factors. So do you plan on doing it again for a third time?
I don't plan on doing it again. I would never say I would never do it again. It's in my heart. And I remember saying I interviewed Dixie on my show, and I was saying to her, when you're old and grey, I said to her, which even you will be one day, you're gonna, when you look back, which one's gonna make you smile the most? Which of the trails? And she said the Appalachian Trail. Yeah. Probably because it was her first, and that's probably because it was my first as well.
Right.
But I've done the Camino de Santiago, which I loved. I'd love to do another one of those. And my girlfriend and I are talking about doing the Portuguese Camino, which is about 200 miles in 2025. And that's what we're trying to work towards. And I've got this one next year. I know the window is closing. I don't know when it's going to close on me without me knowing it, So I still want to do things, but I want to pick and choose what I do.
Right.
The chance to do another AT is so tempting, but I've got my podcast to do. I don't want to podcast it again because I've already podcasted it once. It would seem to me it's just repeating the same thing. Someone did suggest to me if I did it again, I could podcast and just interview other people and not talk about what I'm doing myself. And I may that's an attraction to me. But I think I don't think I've got another 2,200 mile hiking me. I don't think so, but you just never know. I feel great right now. Yeah. So I'm feeling fit.
You didn't think you had another 2,000 mile hike after you'd done it the first time either, though, did you?
No, I didn't get another 5-minute hike after I did it the first time. I did some presentations. I said, I'm never, ever, ever going to hike again as long as I live. I was totally one and done. But there's something about it.
I remember you saying that.
There's something about it, Paul. You just look at it. I actually got tempted, but back into hiking by watching the movie Mile and a Half about the John Muir Trail, which I've now failed at 3 times, by the way. And it was, I was watching it, and my wife at the time was on the other end of the sofa. She was watching me watching it, and she said, "You want to do this, don't you?" And until she said that, I hadn't had it in my mind that that's what I wanted to do. I said, "Yeah, I think I do." And so it went from there. And I failed then. I failed last year with Julie as well, and another time in between. And it's still. And you mentioned about it being your hike up to McAfee not being humbling. Backpacking is a humbling experience anyway.
That is
true. And we're all better for being humbled at some stage on the trail.
Yep.
And the fact that I've failed 3 times the John Muir Trail just makes it more attractive to me. It makes the whole thing more attractive. This isn't something everybody can do, but it's something everybody can try to do. And if they don't finish, that's fine. But they doesn't mean say they can necessarily do it.
But you did finally make it up to the top of Mount Whitney.
Oh yes.
Yep.
Yeah. 2 months after I was in hospital with a heart condition.
Yeah, I remember that.
You know what, though?
I remember that.
You know what? That funny enough, that I found out about my heart thing. So I just bought a new Apple Watch, and I checked my heart rate. It was 185 that day. I was driving around. I thought, that's not good. So I drove around another 15, 20 minutes. It still wasn't getting any better. So I thought, I'm going to go home and just lie down because I'm medically trained, as you can tell. So I went back towards home, and I checked my heart again. It was back up to 170 odd. I thought, oh no, this is not good. So I called my doctor. She said, go straight to the emergency room. So I drove myself to the emergency room. I think she meant take an ambulance, but anyway.
Probably.
And by the time I got there, I was virtually doubled up. And they took me inside, kept me overnight, charged me $30,000, happy days, which Medicare paid for, by the way. And they just never found out what it was. They put me on a statin and a baby aspirin for about a month. I said, I'm not taking these anymore. Is there any medical reason for me to take these? I said, no, not really. He said, well, I'm not going to take them anymore then. So I stopped taking those, and I felt fine ever since. And when I went on up Whitney, the guy who's on my podcast, he said, I'll get you to Whitney. It's a 75-mile trek across country and then climbing Whitney, on day 5. And one of the reasons was, and I think I said this in the podcast, I said, I don't think it was the altitude that was giving me a problem. It was my attitude that was giving me a problem. Because the John Muir Trail has so few places you can get off the trail. When I came to a place I could get off, I took that opportunity. So I wasn't doing well with the hike. On the trail, on the one I did when I got to Whitney, the only way I could have got off the trail, literally the only way, would have been a $15,000 helicopter. And there was no way I was going to do that because Medicare weren't going to pay for that. Unreasonably, I say. And so it just kept me going. And he kept taking us up and then overpasses and down. We slept lower overnight. Then we go up again, then down again. And suddenly there I'm at the top of Whitney. It was fantastic.
So it was almost like what you were saying at the beginning of our chat today about, why you didn't take your tent with you.
Yes, I didn't want to. You're right, absolutely right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's because I think I'm a lazy person, and I think that I take opportunities not to do stuff as opposed to do stuff, and I was aware that once I realised that I could do the elevation, I thought I could do bloody anything, to be honest with you. And so I thought, I then thought about doing a hammock. Yeah, do that. When my girlfriend said, "Well, take your tent just in case," I didn't want a just in case.
Right.
I wanted to try something and do it again. The second night was great. Third night was great. And it was fine. I didn't die. It was great.
do you think if you had taken your tent as well, do you think you would have given the hammock a full chance like
No.
you did?
No.
So you think after that first night you would have?
After 2 nights, I thought, I don't want to ruin it, so I'll go my tent. So,
Okay.
I'm happy with that. I don't mind that at all. I gave myself something I thought would test me or would be more difficult for me. It turned out to be easier, and I really enjoyed it.
Awesome.
Cool.
Awesome.
Another mission
Cool.
successful.
Yes.
So now, are you going to be coming to HangCon
When is
in
it?
January?
Oh, January.
Yep.
Yeah, I'll come to that. Yeah.
Okay.
I may even bring my hammock. Who knows?
There might be a few hanging.
Sounds
in the
good.
trees,
Sounds
yeah.
good.
I'm sure there will
right.
be. I'm sure there will be. Yeah. I'd love to.
Yep.
I'd love the idea. I loved it when I went there before. It just didn't convert me at the time. What's actually converted me is me forcing myself to do it and not having that option. I think I probably would have wimped out after 2 days, but this time I didn't because I couldn't. And I followed through with it, got to the end of it, and I really enjoyed it.
All right. So now, I know, you're new into hammocking. You've only got, a week or so actually in a hammock.
Sure.
So hopefully you can answer this. Okay. What would 3 tips be that you would give somebody else that is thinking about getting into hammocking?
Ask your advice. Because you gave me this. Ask somebody who knows about it. You can go to YouTube and somebody will give you their perspective, and they might be trying to sell you something, whatever. I hope, as a friend, said to me, "I think this will work for you. This will work for you. That work for you," and I trusted your judgment. There's no point in me reinventing the wheel and working out what's going to fit. It's going to work for me.
Right.
I asked somebody who trusted me. So that would be one thing. Ask somebody you trust to set you up right. Second thing, give it a chance. It isn't for everybody, and I'm sure you know that already. Yeah. And I know you want to convert people to hammocks, but some people just don't want to do it.
Right.
And it may be they're reluctant the same way I was reluctant. But, I think to people, if they want to try it, if this old fool can do it, anybody can do it. So try it out. Third one, take a chair. Take a chair to sit underneath your I keep them at the top. The tarp. So you can sit under there with your poles up there, and you're looking over your property. It's like being on the front porch or something. So I really enjoyed that idea. I actually just sat on the floor a couple of times and just looked out.
Nice.
Yeah, so they're the 3 things. And just try it. Just try it. And if you don't like it, you don't like it. One great thing about experience is you can only get experience by experiencing. So you try it out. If you don't like it, that's fine. It's a bit like you tell a kid, right, I don't like this food. Well, you've had none of it. Well, okay, but I don't like it. Take a mouthful. If you then don't like it, you don't have to eat it. Right. Normally I'll say I don't like it, but some will say, oh, that was nice. So, and I feel that way with hammocking.
Awesome. Well, I know I'm glad that, we got you converted.
Yeah, you got a shockingly smug smile on your face right now. Okay. All right.
Anytime we can convert somebody and make them a little more comfortable, it's always a good day.
It is. Thank you. Yeah, appreciate that.
All right. Well, I want to thank you, Mighty Blue, for coming on and, sharing your experiences with us, about making the swap to hammocks. And, I'm glad that you're off the ground and swinging in the trees with us. I hope that you continue to enjoy, the comfort and relaxation that you can get, with your hammock and everything. And, can't wait to see you at HangCon, and maybe even before if we go down to Starkey or whatever.
That's right. Yeah.
We can show you some more tips and tricks and,
and accessories, no doubt.
Accessories. Yep. Yeah,
we're going to accessorize my hammock.
Yeah.
We'll have to get you a peak shelf at least.
You're going to pimp it up.
Yep. We can do that. We can do that for you. So.
Oh, cool. No, I appreciate you giving me giving the time and thinking about it, and I ended up with something that I really liked.
Yep. Good deal.
Okay.
And so, all right. Well, we're gonna wrap it up then, And like I said, appreciate you coming on and chatting with us some.
Of course.
And so for everybody out there, if you're not already subscribed to Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trails podcast, make sure you go and listen. I think you're at what, like 380 something episodes?
386 episodes.
386 episodes now.
And I only missed one. It was the week I had my heart problem.
I remember that.
I was gutted. Yep. I was gutted, I'll tell you. Absolutely gutted that I missed it.
So, if somebody's not, subscribed to it, they got a lot of binge listening to catch up on. But very well worth it. You got a lot of, great guests that you have on there and everything. And,
you were on as a guest, remember?
Yeah, episode. It's funny because I remember my episode. My episode was episode 212.
That's right.
And I remember that because I'd done my through hike in 2012.
I know, that's right.
So it actually worked out pretty good.
I would like to say that was by my design, but it wasn't.
But so yeah, if you're not already listening to Mighty Blues, podcast, go and listen to them. I can promise you, you'll love it. Make sure to go to the hikingradionetwork.com's website as well. And there's the list of all the other podcasts on there. You got Jester Section Hiker, you have the Trail Dames podcast, you have Hiking Unfiltered, and then there's a couple of other
hikes.
They're hikes. You got Dixie on there.
Dixie on the CDT and RTK when he hiked the 80 in 2018. And that one has been listened to more since he finished it 5 years ago.
Really?
Than it was during his hike. Because it's great preparation for people learning to hike.
That's awesome that you're still getting downloads on those.
Oh, it's more than double the downloads since he finished.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So there's all kinds of stuff to listen to once you go to the hikingradionetwork.com website. I'll have all those links in the show notes. That way all you got to do is click on them and go. Make sure to look out for more information about the upcoming Woods Hole weekend as well. As we get more information, I'll make sure to mention it on the podcast and also, post it on social media.
Sure.
So don't forget to follow and like us on Facebook and Instagram. Subscribe to us on YouTube. Make sure to share us with all your friends and family as well to help the show grow. And like always, until next week, happy hanging, everyone.